Before we start the video, I'd just like to introduce our new revision package. For $10, you get 7 days access to our entire ACCA Performance Management exam course. For more details, please check out the links in the description below. And now, on to our video. Hello everyone, and how are you all doing today? So today we're going to be doing yet another question from the ACCA Performance Management exam. This time from the exam for June 2017, and this is question number 32 in section C. Okay, another written question, this time for the Balanced Scorecard, which is a very popular topic to test in section C in the exam. Okay, so as always, we'll be starting with reading the requirement. Okay, so the requirement says, A, explain why the Balanced Scorecard approach to performance management is more useful to measure the performance for the People's Bank than a traditional approach using solely financial performance measures, right? So most balanced scorecard questions usually do have a small part that starts with something basic like this, right? Explain why the balanced scorecard is being used, or explain the 4 perspectives of the balanced scorecard, and so on and so forth. So this is for 4 marks, so we won't be spending too much time here. The main part is the 16 marker right below this, okay? So part A, we need to explain why the balanced scorecard is more useful to measure the performance of the People's Bank, which is the question in this, which is the company in this case, rather than just using financial performance measures. So 4 marks, that means we need to make 4 good points. Okay, so let's start by labeling our question. Question number 32, let's make the label bold so that it's distinguished from the rest of the answer. Part A, remember to label your parts as always. Okay, so let's read the case. The People's Bank is a bank based in the country of Norway. It has a total of 65 branches across the country and also offers online banking, access to services via computer, telephone banking, customer service agents over the telephone to its customers. Recently, the People's Bank has also begun offering its customers a range of mobile banking services, which can be accessed from the customer's smartphones and tablet phones. Its customer base is made up of both private individuals and business customers, and the range of services include all of this stuff, right? So this is generally fluff. Let's get further on. Okay. It says the bank's vision. Now this is important, right? Whenever they give you the vision or mission statement for an analysis question, please do underline it, because you can always link back the analysis that, oh, they're doing this, or this was done because of their vision, which in this case is that the bank gives back to its customers. So we already have a point there, right? The bank wants to give back to its customers, and the balanced scorecard has a customer perspective, which will cater to that rather than just using the traditional financial analysis. And their purpose is to help people and businesses in Norway to live better lives and achieve their ambitions. Okay, so they're more like more social causes in their mission statement or purpose than a standard bank, right? In order to achieve this, the bank's values are stated as putting customers' needs first, which involves anticipating and understanding their needs, and making products and services accessible to customers as much as possible. They recently invested heavily in IT security. Okay, this might be relevant to when we do the analysis further on. To prevent fraud, and also invested to make more services accessible to disabled and visually impaired customers. So these 3 points are the important ones for our analysis, I would think. Making business simple, which involves identifying opportunities to simplify activities and clearly communicating. Making a difference to the communities they serve by helping disadvantaged and new homeowners, but also supporting small and medium businesses and acting fairly and responsible. And then extracts of their balanced scorecard are shown below. But those extracts are for the second part, because we don't need to analyze this with the balanced scorecard. We just need to determine why they should use the balanced scorecard right now, right? So the balanced scorecard, let's start with a brief introduction, right? No need to go overboard. You're not going to get marks just for an introduction, but it's always good to just give a brief one. Covers 4 perspectives for assessing a company's performance. These include and then we can remember these: customer perspective, internal perspective, learning and growth perspective, right? Learning and growth perspective, and the financial perspective, of course. Okay, and now we do the analysis. Why should the company use this rather than just traditional financial analysis? Given the fact that the People's Bank wants to cater to their customers according to their vision statement, they will need to assess their performance from that aspect, which is covered by the Balanced Scorecard, right? Furthermore, they have various values which go beyond traditional financial objectives, such as helping the community and making things easier for customers. These cannot be addressed with a traditional financial analysis. However, a balanced scorecard can help them. For example, so we can be specific here, like they're saying identify opportunities to simplify activities, right? That could be covered by the internal perspective, right? Identifying simplifying opportunities to simplify activities falls under the internal perspective, given that they will be moving to make a difference in communities, can be covered by the customer and learning perspectives. Thus, the balanced scorecard can help cater to their more social values while also keeping the financial performance in mind, right? So 4 marks, I think that's more than enough. We've given some specific examples, because sometimes the risk is that when writing such introductions, we become too vague, and while we might still get some marks, it's better to hit some specific examples like we did over here, okay? And then to conclude. So that's just the 4 mark part, that's not the important one. Let's get into the meat of the matter, which is the 16 marker. So it says, using all the information provided, including People's Bank vision and values, which we'll link back to, discuss the performance of the People's Bank in 2006, 16, whatever, right? Now, we need to be careful. They're telling us to discuss the performance. So we need to assess, is it good, is it bad, right? And based on the fact, we need to assess it based on the visions and values of the bank, okay? And note, use each of the 4 headings of the balanced scorecard to structure your discussion, even if they hadn't given you that note. This is a standard ploy. When answering a question about the balanced scorecard, give headings for each of the 4 perspectives to show what you're discussing, and then give an overall conclusion at the end, okay? So, part B, and we have our balanced scorecard performance measures, so we'll go in the order. 16 marks, and if you notice, each perspective has 4 different metrics. So technically we could make 1 point per metric and get 16 points for 16 marks, right? You don't necessarily have to do it that way. You could analyze the whole 4 metrics of each perspective collectively. I would advise to do it individually so that you don't mix up too many things, and then based on those individual assessments, if you can link the metrics together, then you can analyze them accordingly. Okay, so we'll go in the same order that they have. We'll start with the financial perspective. So once again, if it's a heading, make it bold, italic, something like that to distinguish it from the rest of the text. That's simple presentation, right? Okay, so the first metric is the return on capital employed, which was 11% in actual, whereas the target was 12%. So they did not hit the target. I'll repeat the point I've made over and over again. Analysis is not saying, oh, the return on capital employed was less than the target, that was a bad performance. No, that's not what the marker is looking for. That's stating the obvious. Why were they not able to achieve the return on capital employed? What was the reason behind it, right? So that's what we need to look at. So we'll say the bank was unable to hit its targeted ROCE of 12%, falling short by 1%. Now, what could be a reason for this? Remember the formula for ROCE. Let's put this all to the next page so that it doesn't look weird. Okay, what was the formula for ROCE? It was profit over capital employed. So ROCE being less either means your profit was either less than expected or your capital was more than expected. So let's go back up. Remember anything from the case that implies any of those two things happened? Well, definitely. What did we say? The People's Bank had invested heavily in IT security, right? So that means more investment in capital, IT capital, and that means that your capital employed goes up, your ROCE goes down. So we can make a point here. So one of the reasons for this could be the heavy investment in IT security. This would have increased the capital employed, causing the ROCE to go down. Given that this will benefit the company in the future regarding its operations and values, because they want things to be more secure, this is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So they're taking a hit right now, a bad thing, but in the future they'll get the benefit out of this, right? And it's just a 1% drop, so you can also mention it's a small drop. Okay, number 2, interest income. Okay, so it's a bank. So if it's a bank, what is interest income? Basically the revenue. So instead of the targeted 7 million, they made 7.5 million. They exceeded their target. Okay, so what could be a reason for this? Now, before I move on, I need to make a certain point. Sometimes you'll find certain metrics which you can link to each other. Okay, for example, notice here we have the amount of new lending to SMEs, which were the small medium enterprises, and then you have another metric about SMEs, the number of colleagues trained to provide advice to SMEs. So that's just a natural link. You can link those two metrics together. Likewise, whenever you have the metric of complaints, right, this is a standard metric you can link to pretty much anything. So if the complaints are going up, you can link anything bad to the complaints, right? This is the reason the complaints are going up. And if the complaints are going down, you can link anything good to the fact that complaints are going down, that they're going down for that good reason. Okay, just some standard points for you to remember. Okay, so what could have caused their revenue to go up? Okay, one could be they're trying to make their business simple, simplify activities. They're making differences to communities they serve, etc. They have more IT security, etc. And they're more accessible to disabled and visually impaired customers. So all these reasons could be reasons for the revenue increasing. But we need to make sure that they're actually succeeding in all of that. Okay, so let's try to link this to something. So if we go by it, number of wheelchair ramps installed. So the target was 50, they actually exceeded that by 55. A number of talking cash points for the visually impaired. Target was 100 and they achieved 120. So they exceeded those targets. So because they were more accessible, they got more customers, which meant they got more interest income, right? That's one of the many points we can make. So there's so many points, honestly, that can be made here that it's a very easy question, but let's just focus, right? So let's not get caught into it and just start thinking points and not writing anything down. So the interest income was 7.5 million, which is higher than the target of 7 million. Okay. One of the reasons for this could be the value to increase accessibility to disadvantaged customers. This can be seen from the fact that the bank installed more talking cash points and wheelchair ramps than the target was. Right? My spelling's all over the place. Wheelchair ramps, so wheelchair ramps. Okay, so basically easier access means more customers, which means more income. Okay, let's move on. The next one, net interest margin, right? The margin achieved on interest income. In other words, how much interest they were charging for loans, right? That they were getting their interest on. Now that's actually decreased. So it was 2.5% target. They only achieved 2.4%. What could be a reason for that? Well, one primary reason could be the interest income itself. Think about it. The interest income is the overall interest collected. The net interest margin is basically the amount of interest or the price of a loan, basically, right? If the price of the loan falls like it did here, so instead of 2.5%, they only had 2.4% on average. What do you think will happen? Will people take more loans or less loans? They'll take more loans. So that could be a reason for the increase in interest income as a whole. So we'll link the two metrics together. The net interest margin was 2.4%, which was below the target of 2.5%. So we'll link it back. One of the reasons for this could be the bank's value. So what was the bank trying to do? That it was trying to help new customers, etc. Of catering to customers, and they did so by reducing the interest rates on loans given. While this did reduce the interest margin, it could be a reason for people taking out more loans, thereby increasing the overall interest income, right? Okay, next point, amount of new lending to SMEs. They fell short of the target. So it was 150 million, they only got 135 million. And if we look at the point below, like I said, that has SMEs as well. This point is about the number of colleagues trained to provide advice to SMEs. And they fell short of that target as well. They were supposed to train 1,500 people. They only trained 1,300 people. So we can link these together. The bank was unable to achieve its target of lending to SMEs. One reason for this could be that they were also unable to train enough colleagues to provide advice to SMEs. So we've linked the two metrics together. Okay, so we're done with the financial perspective. Let's just wrap up with a small conclusion for the financial perspective so that we can make our overall analysis easier later on, right? So how did they do financially? ROC, they didn't hit the target, but we said it's not necessarily a bad thing. Interest income, they were higher than the target, which was good. The net interest margin was lower, but we said one of the reasons could be to increase the interest income, but they were unable to achieve the SME's part, right? So we'll say overall the bank had an average performance, financial performance, where they were able to cater to their values, but sometimes it was at the expense of their financial performance, right? Okay, next we have the customer perspective. So customer perspective, we give the heading. Okay, let's move this down to the next page. So customer perspective, number of first-time home buyers given a mortgage by the People's Bank, and this has increased, right? And if I remember correctly, somewhere it said, yeah, making a difference to the communities they serve, which primarily help disadvantaged and new homeowners, right? So that's why. So we can say the bank exceeded its target of mortgages given to first-time home buyers in line with their value to help new home owners. Okay, so that's standard analysis. Now, just to help you guys out a bit more, that's standard analysis, but if you want, so this would be good enough for the exam, but we can hit more points, right? Think about it. First-time home buyers, if they're given a mortgage, there's more of them, that means more customers, that would also mean more revenue. So we can link it back to previous metrics. Okay, so this increase in mortgages could also have led to the increase in interest income. So we're linking things all over the place, and this will help us in earning brownie points from the market because it shows a comprehensive analysis across various different issues, right? Number of complaints, like we said, this is a standard metric which you can link to anything good or bad depending on what's happening. So in this case, number of complaints went down from 2, the target was 2, the actual were 1.5, so they improved, right? So we can link anything good to this. Let's link the following two metrics, which we've already talked about a bit already. The accessibility by talking cash points and wheelchairs. There's more accessibility, less complaints, right? The number of complaints was lower than the target. This could possibly be due to the fact that the number of talking cash points and wheelchair ramps increased significantly, well above the target. So we're linking all of them together, right? So we're doing all the analysis collectively. More accessibility means less complaints. And let's just talk about the other 2 points. The reason for this high focus on accessibility through installing ramps and cash points is due to the company wanting to anticipate and understand customer needs, right, to make their products and services more accessible. Now, why did I use this particular wording, right? Because this is exactly what the wording was up here in point 1, right? So we're linking it back to that, okay? So we've covered that. Customer perspective, they've pretty much exceeded everything. As far as the customer perspective goes, the bank has done very well by exceeding all the targets, okay? So there's the customer perspective. Let's leave a space to make it more readable and move to the internal perspective, okay? So internal perspective has to do with the processes of the organization. So the first one, number of business processes within the People's Bank re-engineered and simplified, and they've exceeded the target from 100 to 110. Once again, this has to do with the fact that they wanted to simplify things, right? They mentioned that making business simple and identifying opportunities to simplify activities. So the bank exceeded its target with regards to re-engineering and simplifying its business processes, right? This is in line with their value to make business simple, right? Now again, this pointer on its own right would be enough, but brownie points, like I said, anything good you can link back to number of customer complaints. So let's do that, okay? So this could be another reason for the drop in customer complaints, okay? Now we're getting those brownie points as well. Now let's move on. It says number of new services made available through mobile banking. And again, I think this was one of the points that they had somewhere, that one, they began offering a range of mobile banking services, and the reason they want to do it obviously is to make things more accessible to as many customers as possible, okay? So they actually did not achieve this target. They fell short of it, okay? And what could be a reason for this? Well, one reason that we can always give is that look at how many different goals they have, right? In general, Balanced Scorecard always has the risk that the company puts so many different goals and objectives that they're not able to achieve it because it's simply not possible. 16 different targets, right? It's a lot. So we can say because they were so focused on certain targets, like the ones they did good in, they were unable to achieve this, right? It's a generic point, but it'll still get you a mark, okay? So the bank was unable to increase the number of new services through mobile banking to the required level. One reason could be because they were so focused on many of their other targets, many of their other objectives, that they did not have enough time and effort to fulfill this one. This is bad because it goes against their value of making their products and services more accessible. However, as we've seen in the previous things, they have been addressing the accessibility through other means. Right, so we're highlighting that while they didn't achieve this, they still have been addressing that thing through other means, right? Okay, next, incidences of fraud on customers' accounts or credit cards. And they were well below the target. So this is a very good performance, okay, especially for a bank where fraud is critical. So again, they invested heavily in IT security to prevent fraud. So we have our reasoning right there, right? But we could also link it once again to the number of customer complaints, because they went down. So we can always link it to that as well, right? That less fraud means less complaints. The incidences of fraud were well below the target, which is fantastic for a bank. One reason for this could be the heavy investment in IT security, right? This could also have led to the decrease in customer complaints, right? Okay, so there's that. After that, incidences of fraud, total carbon dioxide emissions. Now this is curious. Why would a bank have carbon dioxide emissions? Honestly, the only thing that could relate to this is the IT equipment, right? Because most people don't know this, but it's not just cars and stuff that produce these emissions. Even computers and laptops, ACs, they produce these emissions as well. So we can blame the fact that it went from 400,000 to 430,000 on the new IT equipment, okay? The carbon emissions were above the target. Carbon emissions were above the target level, possibly due to the new IT equipment having more emissions, right? While the target was not achieved, this is not one of the main focuses of the bank's values, so it is not a major concern, right? Because they haven't really mentioned anything environmental, right? So we can say that, yeah, they want to cater to customers and have them have better lives, but there's no environmental focus, so we can say that, right? It's not one of the main focuses of the bank's values, so it's not a major concern, okay? What about the internal processes? So they did very well in some targets, but they didn't do too well in others. As far as internal processes go, the bank did very well in some targets, but fell short in others. This could be indicative that there were too many objectives set for the bank to be able to cater to all of them. Okay. And last, we have the learning and growth perspective. Learning and growth perspective. Okay. So what can we write here? Let's start with the first one. Number of colleagues trained to provide advice to SMEs. We've hit this before, that that led to less lending to SMEs as well. But what could be a reason? So the bank was unable to train the targeted number of people to provide advice to SMEs. This meant they were unable to lend as much as desired to SMEs. This falls short of one of their values of supporting SMEs, and they need to improve in this regard, right? So we've linked it to another metric as well as the values. Okay, number of hours paid for by the People's Bank used to support community projects, and they were able to exceed it by a small amount, but they were able to exceed it, right? So we can actually link it to the training for the colleagues for SMEs, right? Because the people were spending too much time on the community projects, they were unable to be trained for the SMEs. Yeah, you can link that point. So the bank exceeded its target to have staff, number of hours used to support. But it doesn't mention staff, so we can't make that point actually. To have a target of having hours to support community projects. This is again in line with their value to help. Which value would we link this to? There was a value on top somewhere, right? They want to put customer needs first, and to be honest, they're acting fairly, acting fairly and responsibly at all times, right? Right at the end, we can link this to that. Otherwise, we could say that maybe they weren't addressing their values. Okay, to act fairly and responsibly at all times. Okay, so we've linked it to that value. Number of trainee positions taken up by candidates from Naukri's most disadvantaged areas, and they want to help disadvantaged people. So they fell short of the target, but only by a small amount, so we can mention that. They fell slightly short of the target to provide trainee positions to candidates from disadvantaged areas. Okay, so however, this difference is minor and not too serious. However, they did fall short of their value of helping disadvantaged communities. Okay, and last one, we should be wrapping up from a time standpoint as well. Number of community organizations supported either through funding or by volunteers from the People's Bank, and they exceeded the target. Okay, and we can actually link this, because if they're supporting through funding, that means their profits are going down because their expenses will be higher, which results in a lower ROCE. So we'll link this to that. Okay, the bank exceeded its target of supporting community organizations through funding or volunteers. However, this could have increased their expenses, decreasing their profits, and hence their ROCE. Okay. So once again, for the learning and growth perspective, they exceeded some targets, but they failed in others. Okay. So now we can give an overall conclusion as well, along with the conclusion for learning and growth. So here the bank was again able to meet some targets, but failed others. Once again, suggesting there were too many targets to cater to. And now let's give the final conclusion. So this final conclusion honestly depends on you, because they did well in a lot of areas and poorly in a lot of areas. So for example, we can say that they hit a lot of their values, so they focused a lot on that. But because of that, their profitability went down slightly and their financial performance was slightly compromised. So we can start by saying overall the bank was able to exceed many targets and did many things in line with their values. This is good as it would enhance the bank's reputation and establish what their values are. However, they were unable to meet certain targets. This suggests that having 16 objectives is too much for the bank and they should reduce them. Furthermore, some of their financial performance is being compromised due to the focus on more social issues. The bank needs to decide whether it is going to work as a social organization or a profit-oriented one in order to excel. Okay, so we're done here. That's our overall conclusion. It took us quite a bit of time, but we got it through. Okay, so that's how we would do a balanced scorecard question. Okay, the analysis was thorough. We were able to link it back to the values, which we must always do, back to the vision, and we were able to link different different metrics with each other for the brownie points. Okay, so I hope this benefited you guys, and we structured our answer according to the requirements, and we basically hit all the important things I believe that we needed to cover. Okay, so the last point I'd like to make to you guys is that students usually get intimidated by 20 markers based on analysis where there's little to no calculations involved. But please don't be, right? As you saw, it's not really that difficult. What is analysis? Simply coming up with reasons, right? And you do analysis all the time for various things, right? You come up with reasons for why you didn't do your homework, etc., right? So same thing here. Just come up with good reasons on why something happened or didn't happen. You're all capable of doing it, and they're easy marks to get. So don't be overly focused on the calculations, etc., and the formulas. Also be ready for analysis, and in fact make that your bread and butter. Focus on getting these quick and easier marks so that you can do well in the exam. Okay, so I'll see you guys next time.